On a freezing November evening in Columbus, Ohio, Emily Carter, 38, stood outside the county courthouse holding a worn leather purse. Inside it were exactly 37 by 14. That was all she had left after 12 years of marriage. Her divorce had become uglier than she ever imagined. Her ex-husband, Ryan, had managed most of the finances during their marriage. While the settlement was technically fair on paper, the legal fees, moving costs, and months without steady work had drained every dollar she owned. She watched other people rushing to their cars while cold rain soaked her thin coat. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Ryan. "Hope this teaches you that dreams don't pay bills." Emily stared at the message before quietly deleting it. She didn't reply. She simply whispered to herself, "One day, I'll never have to explain my worth to anyone again." That night, she moved into the smallest apartment she could find. The bedroom barely fit a twin mattress. The kitchen sink leaked. The heater worked only when it wanted to. She unpacked 3 boxes: clothes, family photos, a notebook filled with business ideas she'd been writing for years. Ideas Ryan had always laughed at. The next morning, she walked into a neighborhood grocery store looking for work. The manager looked over her resume. "You have a marketing degree?" Emily smiled awkwardly. "I'll stock shelves if that's what you need." He hired her for the overnight shift. Every night she stacked cereal boxes, cleaned aisles, and organized inventory. Every morning she came home exhausted. But before sleeping, she opened that old notebook. She spent 2 hours studying online business, branding, customer psychology, and digital marketing. She couldn't afford expensive courses. Everything she learned came from free videos, library books, and trial and error. One page of the notebook had a sentence she'd written years before. "Someone is waiting for the solution I haven't built yet." She underlined it again. She refused to let it become just another forgotten dream. One Saturday afternoon, an elderly woman struggled to reach a heavy box from a high shelf. Emily immediately helped her. The woman smiled warmly. "You seem too kind to be working this hard." Emily laughed. "I'm rebuilding." The woman looked into her eyes. "So was I once." Those words stayed with Emily for days. Maybe rebuilding wasn't failure. Maybe rebuilding was the beginning. That same week, she noticed something interesting. Small local businesses around town had terrible websites, outdated logos, and almost no social media presence. Most couldn't afford expensive agencies. Emily had an idea. She created a simple flyer offering affordable branding and online marketing services. She printed 20 copies at the public library. Then she walked door to door. 19 businesses politely declined. One coffee shop owner said, "I can't pay much." Emily smiled. "I just need someone to believe in me." He handed her her first client. The payment? $75? It wasn't much, but it doubled the money she had in the bank. More importantly, someone had trusted her. That night, instead of crying herself to sleep like she had so many nights before, Emily opened her notebook. On the first page, she crossed out one sentence, "Someday," and replaced it with another, "Today is day 1." The little coffee shop became Emily's first success story. Within 3 weeks, the owner called her with a smile. "Our weekend sales are up almost 30%. Customers keep saying they found us online." Emily could hardly believe it. For the first time in years, someone wasn't criticizing her, they were thanking her. The owner recommended her to a friend who owned a local bakery. The bakery owner hired her for a small branding project. Then came a local florist. Then a family-run bookstore. Every new client brought another referral. Emily still worked overnight stocking grocery shelves. Often finishing at 6 a.m., she would grab a cup of coffee, sleep for a few hours, and spend the rest of the day building websites, creating social media campaigns, and meeting clients. She was exhausted. But for the first time in years, she felt alive. One evening, while checking her bank account, she smiled. It had been months since she'd seen more than 2 digits in her balance. Now she had just over $4,000 saved. It wasn't wealth. It was freedom. She bought herself one small celebration, a secondhand laptop that didn't freeze every 20 minutes. As she carried it home, she remembered Ryan's words. "Dreams don't pay bills." She looked at the laptop and whispered, "They're starting to." Not everything went well. One of her biggest clients suddenly canceled a project worth nearly $8,000. Another business refused to pay after she'd already completed the work. For 2 weeks, Emily wondered if she should give up. Then she opened the notebook she'd carried since the divorce. On the last page, she wrote, "If I quit now, they'll be right about me forever." The next morning, she got back to work. Instead of chasing local businesses, Emily decided to specialize in helping women-owned small businesses grow online. She understood their struggles. She knew what it felt like to be underestimated. Her message was simple: your business deserves to be seen. The response surprised her. Soon, she was earning more from her business than from her grocery store job. On a quiet Friday morning, Emily walked into the store manager's office. He smiled. "You're giving your notice, aren't you?" Emily nodded. "I think it's finally time." The manager stood up and shook her hand. "I always knew you weren't meant to stay here." Emily walked out of the store with tears in her eyes, not because she was afraid, but because she had finally chosen herself. That afternoon, she hung a small sign above the desk in her apartment. Carter Creative Marketing. It was only one room, one desk, one laptop, but it was hers. And she promised herself she would never stop building the life she deserved. The first year of Carter Creative Marketing was anything but glamorous. Emily worked from a tiny apartment where the dining table doubled as her office. Client calls happened beside a humming refrigerator, and late-night strategy sessions were interrupted by the sound of rain leaking through an old window. But her clients kept winning. The bakery she helped opened a second location. The florist doubled online orders before Mother's Day. A woman selling handmade candles from her garage quit her factory job after Emily redesigned her website and marketing. One by one, success stories spread. Emily's greatest advertisement wasn't an expensive campaign, it was grateful customers. One morning, she received an email that made her hands shake. A national nonprofit organization that supported women entrepreneurs wanted her agency to lead a branding campaign across several states. It was the biggest opportunity of her life. The contract was worth $250,000. Emily read the email 3 times before believing it. She accepted the project and immediately hired her first 3 employees. 2 single mothers and 1 recent college graduate who had been unable to find work. "I know what it feels like to need someone to take a chance on you," she told them. "We're going to grow together." The campaign was a huge success. News outlets began covering the nonprofit's remarkable results, and Emily's agency was mentioned in interviews and business magazines. Soon major companies started calling. As the business expanded, Emily moved into a modest office downtown. On the first day, she placed the old notebook from her apartment on the corner of her new desk. She opened it to the very first page. "Someone is waiting for the solution I haven't built yet." She smiled. That sentence had carried her through the darkest season of her life. Now it had become reality. One afternoon, while attending a regional business conference, Emily heard a familiar voice behind her. "Emily?" She turned. It was Ryan. He looked older than she remembered, less confident. After a few awkward moments, he admitted he'd heard about her company. "I guess I underestimated you." Emily didn't smile. She didn't argue. She simply replied, "You underestimated what happens when someone refuses to give up." For the first time since the divorce, she felt completely free. She no longer needed an apology. She no longer needed his approval. She had built a life that spoke louder than either. Little did Emily know, an opportunity even bigger than she had ever imagined was only weeks away, one that would turn her into a millionaire and inspire thousands of women across America. Just weeks after the business conference, Emily received a phone call from an investor in New York. He had watched her speak about rebuilding after divorce and empowering women-owned businesses. His first words were simple: "We're not investing in a company. We're investing in you." Emily flew to New York with nothing but a laptop, her old notebook, and a presentation she had rewritten more than 20 times. She wasn't trying to impress anyone with flashy numbers. Instead, she shared the stories of her clients. The bakery owner who hired 5 new employees, the candle maker who bought her first home, and the single mother whose online boutique had become profitable. By the end of the meeting, the investors were silent. Then the lead investor smiled. "We believe your company can help thousands more." A week later, Emily signed a $2 million investment deal to expand Carter Creative Marketing nationwide. She sat alone in her hotel room after the signing, staring at the contract. 4 years earlier, she had walked out of a courthouse with just $37.14. Now she was leading a company valued in the millions. With the investment, Emily hired talented designers, marketers, and software developers from across the country. She also launched a free mentorship program for divorced and single women who wanted to start businesses but didn't know where to begin. Applications poured in from every state. Many of the women wrote the same sentence: "Your story gave me hope." Emily read every application herself. She remembered exactly what hopelessness felt like. Then came the moment that changed everything. A national business magazine released its annual list of America's fastest-growing women-led companies. Carter Creative Marketing ranked among the top newcomers. Television interviews followed. Podcasts invited her to share her journey. People everywhere wanted to know how a woman who had once counted every dollar in her purse had become a millionaire entrepreneur. During one interview, the host asked, "If you could go back and speak to the woman leaving the courthouse with $37, what would you tell her?" Emily smiled through tears. "I'd tell her that losing a marriage isn't losing your future. Sometimes the hardest goodbye is the first hello to the life you were meant to live." The clip went viral. Millions of people shared it. But Emily's greatest success wasn't the money. It was the thousands of women who finally believed they could start over. Still, one final chapter remained. One that would bring her journey full circle in a way she never expected. 5 years after leaving the courthouse with $37.14, Emily stood on a stage in Chicago before an audience of more than 5,000 women entrepreneurs. The applause lasted nearly a minute. As she looked across the room, she noticed something that made her pause. In the front row sat women of every age: young mothers, recent college graduates, widows, retirees, and divorced women who were just beginning again. She realized they hadn't come to hear about millions of dollars. They had come to hear about hope. Emily took a deep breath and began. "I used to believe my divorce was the end of my story." She smiled. It wasn't. It was the first page of a better one. The audience grew silent. She shared the nights she cried herself to sleep. The grocery store shifts. The fear of failing. The rejection from 19 businesses before one person finally said yes. Then she held up the same worn notebook she had carried since the day her marriage ended. The pages were faded. The corners were torn. But inside were the dreams that had refused to die. "I kept this because it reminds me that your circumstances don't decide your future. Your decisions do." Many people in the audience wiped away tears. After the event, a young woman approached Emily. She looked nervous. "I almost didn't come today," she admitted. "My husband left me 3 months ago. I have $42 in my bank account, and I thought my life was over." Emily smiled gently. "It isn't over." She reached into her purse and handed the woman the old notebook. The young woman looked shocked. "But this is yours." Emily nodded. "It was, now it's yours. Fill the empty pages with dreams bigger than your fears." The woman hugged her tightly, both of them crying. Months later, Emily received a package in the mail. Inside was a brand new leather notebook. On the first page was a handwritten note. "Because you believed in me, I believed in myself. My business is growing, and for the first time in years, I'm excited about tomorrow. Thank you for proving that new beginnings are real." Emily closed the notebook and smiled. She placed it beside the framed photo of the tiny apartment where she had once started over. The millions she earned had changed her lifestyle. But helping someone else believe in themselves, that changed her heart. As she looked out the office window, she whispered the words that had carried her through every setback. Your greatest comeback begins the moment you stop letting your past define your future. And with that, Emily turned the page. Not because her story was over, but because she knew someone else's was just beginning. The end. It's the courage to do what's right, even when it's the hardest choice. The end. It's the courage to do what's right, even when it's the hardest choice. The end. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who believes in second chances. Your support helps bring more emotional stories like this to life.